Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. Only 2 more weeks until Halloween, folks. And I trust you've all picked out your costumes and decorated the yard. I too have been busy selecting calls, and do I have a selection for you here this evening? Lots of oddball stuff to go through tonight. So what do you say we just get started? Coming to us from the Rocky Mountain state of Colorado, please welcome Brittany to tonight's program.
Hi Derek, my name is Brittany. I currently live in Colorado, but my story takes place in Boulder, Wyoming, which is a very small town, population of 19. And there's only one business there, which is called the Boulder Store, and it is located at the intersection of U.S. Highway 191 and Wyoming Highway 353, and it is just 12 miles from Pinedale, Wyoming. Now, the only business that is there is called the Boulder Store, which is a gas station, restaurant, and bar all in one little building. And they also have a hotel, which is in a separate building. But I was waitressing there. And this was a while ago, but when I was waitressing there, I was doing the closing shift. This was around winter time. It was just me and the cook there. The cook was in the kitchen doing his own thing. I was closing down the restaurant. So I have already cleaned and shut down one area of the restaurant, one section, and I was in a different section cleaning up, and I had all the lights out in one of the sections, obviously the lights on where I was cleaning. I was sitting there sweeping the floor, and I don't know what it was that made me look up, but I looked up and I saw a full body apparition of a man come out of the kitchen and just walk through the restaurant and disappear. It was very strange because this man, which it was a man, had like a blue hue to him. Big man, see-through, but yet there was enough detail to know it was a man. I could tell he had boots on, jeans on, looked like a flannel, but it was really strange. It was like slow motion. I was sleeping, holding the broom, looked up, watched him come out of the kitchen and just walk through. I could see his arms swing, his legs moving, his face turned and looked at me, looked forward, took a few more steps, and just completely disappeared. It was very, very strange. I've always been into paranormal, loved watching shows. Always thought if I ever saw an apparition, how scary. I would probably scream and freak out. But that didn't happen. I just watched him, looked down, and finished sweeping. And I don't know, his energy just wasn't mean or malicious or scary in any way. Definitely something I've only seen once in my life. Definitely strange because I've never seen anything like that. And I do think about it every once in a while. But yeah, that is my, I guess, spooky story. Not necessarily very spooky just because I wasn't freaked out by it, but definitely not something that you see every day. Love the podcast. I listen to it every night before I go to bed. Maybe I'll hear this on your podcast someday. I hope you have a great day or night. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Now, what we have here is what we call a non-repeating phantasm, or a Class 5 free-roaming vapor. Real nasty one, too. But in all seriousness, we did a little digging, and from the sounds of things, the little store there in Boulder has always been a family affair. So tracking down this spirit might not be that difficult. Now, the store began as Boulder Mercantile back in the early 1940s, founded and ran by a man named Harold Failer. Now, I've attached a photo of Harold in the show notes. Not exactly a fit to the description that Brittany gave, but a suspect nonetheless. Now, Failer sold the store to the Steele family in the late 40s, and the family still owns it to this day. But in our digging, we found that in the early 1990s, two Steeles in particular owned and operated the restaurant portion of the building. Their names were Donna and Pete Steele. And believe it or not, Delaney found a photo. And again, believe it or not, in the photo, old Pete is wearing what appears to me to be a blue flannel shirt. Now, the picture is in black and white, so I can't be certain, but it's definitely a flannel shirt. So have a look at those photos in the show notes, Brittany, and tell us if either of these gentlemen might be the apparition that you saw all those years ago. And a big thanks for calling in tonight. I really enjoy wholesome ghost stories like this, family store ghosts, so to speak. And this one did not let me down. Now, if you also have a story you think won't let me down, give our hotline a call at 888-608-NIGHT. That's 888-608-NIGHT. Or shoot me an email at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. Remember not to record from a moving vehicle, because it sounds terrible. Now, next up, we venture to New York for another ghostly story. Only this time, a little more sinister than before. Alex, welcome to the program.
Hi, Derek. This is Alex from Broome County, New York. So, a couple months back now, my household and I have been house hunting, looking to purchase a place in the country. So, we go to a particular house, and it's pretty run down. It's a little frightening, to be honest. It's gross. And I go up to one of the upstairs rooms, and I just feel like I shouldn't be there. Like, I need to leave. I don't like it. I want to leave. I don't really think too much of it because, I'm kind of, it's not a great house. There's mold. I could have just been affected by that. I go to a different room upstairs. I get the same feeling. We end up not purchasing that house, obviously. And a few weeks after that, my wife is talking to one of her coworkers she lives out in that area. She's a firefighter out there. So, she knows all the stories. And my wife mentions the address of the place. And her coworker is just like, yeah, that's a murder house. And she sends my wife an article, which we'll see about emailing to you. But as far as I understand it, a couple had killed their young daughter. And based on the article, it seems like it had been the mother who would orchestrated it. But she got the murder charge and he got manslaughter. What I understand, the man ended up living back in the house. I'm not sure if he died or if he just moved out. Anyway, that's my story. I hope it's usable. I love the podcast. Long time, first time. And thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, that's much worse. But good on you, Alex, for sussing out the bad energy. That might have been the only thing stopping you from taking up residence in your town's murder house accidentally. Talk about dodging a bullet. Thank you again, Alex, for calling in. Now, folks, I have so much more in store for you tonight. But first, I have to take a little break to pay our bills. But when I come back, a potentially violent encounter with a well-known cryptid or entity. Truth be told, I'm not sure what it is, but you'll hear all about it right after this.
You thought we were overestimating it. We weren't. I never said we were.
If you go look at their schedule, ugly, good, ugly.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. October is the season for wearing masks and costume, but some of us feel like we wear a mask and hide more often than we want to, whether it's at work, in social settings, or around family. Hiding behind an emotional mask is never fun. Now, therapy can help you accept yourself and become more comfortable in your own skin. You can feel free to take the mask off and live your life how you want to, without constant fear of judgment from others. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, which makes it convenient and flexible. Just fill out a quick questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Take the mask off with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Monsters Among Us today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Monsters Among Us.
But I just look at the matchup.
Now, who here has heard of the Glimmerman? Now, longtime listeners of the show will tell you that it's a humanoid figure that's almost perfectly camouflaged, similar to the Predator from the film series. This shimmering, rippling entity has been seen all over the country, and reports go back 20 or 30 years. Reports just like this one from B, down in Kansas.
Hi, I'm just going to go by B, and my experience happened in Tonganoxie, Kansas in the summer of 1996 when I was 13 years old. We just moved into a mobile home out in the country, and I had moved in all of my stuff. My mom and her boyfriend and my sister were all gone for the evening, so it was just me, and I was in my new room putting away all of my things. And it was the summertime, so the sun takes a while to set, so it was still kind of light outside, but I didn't even think to turn the lights on in the house. So the only light that I turned on was my bedroom. So I was on the phone with my friend, and I had to go to the bathroom, so I put the phone down, and I walked down the hall, and it was all dark, to the bathroom. Went to the bathroom, and then came back out of the bathroom in the dark hallway. Well, the only light that was on was my bedroom. The rest of the house was dark, even though it was dusk outside. I wouldn't say it wasn't all the way dark yet. And I felt something push me so hard in the middle of my back that I fell down to my knee, and I quickly turned around, and I saw what you guys call a Glimmerman. It looked like Predator. It was that clear gel formation. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't in the shape of a human being. It was just a shape, like a mass, but it was clear gel. And I felt very afraid, and it felt like there was somebody standing right there. Although there wasn't anybody there, it was just this big mass. And so, of course, I was upset, and I ran into my room, and I shut the door, and I was putting blankets underneath the door, and my friend's still on the phone, and she heard the whole thing, and she was like, "What's going on?" And I told her what happened, and I didn't know what to do because I didn't know if it could come through the door or whatever. So I just laid on my bedroom floor and just kind of waited for my parents to get home, and my friend stayed on the phone with me. But yeah, that happened in 1996 in the late summertime, probably around end of July, early August, because I remember we were getting ready to go back to school. And the reason why I wanted to call and tell you guys this because season 15, episode 19, about the 8-minute, 30-second mark, you played a recording from Ghost to Ghost that happened in 1994 in Overland Park, Kansas. Well, that's only about 30 minutes away from me. So I just thought that that was really strange that that kid on that call had a very similar experience to me. I always thought this was really weird. I never thought that it was like a ghost per se, but That mobile home, I had so many paranormal experiences there. I saw my very first ghost there. I've been touched in that home. Like, so many things happened there to the point where I wanted to move out and live with my grandma. It was that bad. And of course, nobody listened to me, so I just got used to it. All right, well, I love you. I love the show. Keep up the great work. I have lots more stories, and hopefully I'll have time to call back and let you guys hear all about it. So thanks so much, listeners, for listening, and let's keep this podcast going. I also am a Patreon supporter as well. Thanks, Derek. Bye.
Thanks, B. Shoved by a Glimmerman. That's wild. And the fact that there were two similar accounts from similar dates in similar parts of Kansas. Well, that's wild as well. And that's also an odd detail and an odd place for something like this to occur more than once, let alone a couple of times. So we started poking around in hopes of finding something that would explain why such a report would be made in a place like Kansas. And to our surprise, we might have stumbled upon something. A short 35-minute drive from the location of B's experience is the Kansas City National Security Campus, a research and development center that focuses on electrical products, manufacturing process technologies, materials, mechanical products, simulation and modeling, and testing and measurement engineering. And you know, maybe cutting-edge camouflage is also something they're working on over there. And perhaps they feel so confident in their work that sometimes they decide to do field tests just to see what they can get away with. Sneak out with the suit and poke around some yards. Maybe go inside somebody's house. Well, sure, that sounds far-fetched, but is it any more or less likely than this being some sort of cloaked alien or dimensional traveler? And a test like that could also explain this other Glimmerman sighting from less than 100 miles from the location of B's encounter, courtesy of phantoms and monsters. This is a description of the being I saw in Burlington, Kansas that looked like a cloaked predator from the film series. I had a bird's eye view from an apartment balcony overlooking a smooth bend to the left in the road that passes by the river dam in town. The car made a slight jog to the left, but swerved abruptly to the right like he was trying to avoid hitting something in the road to the left. He went into the ditch and got out very cautiously and seemed to be looking in all directions of what I first thought was a giant swarm of gnats or maybe dust off to the left of the road, about 25 feet from his car. He then got out his phone and proceeded to take a couple of photos of this thing. He definitely looked freaked out and ran back into his car, which I assumed to call a friend. A truck showed up about 5 minutes later to pull him out. Now this mass was still standing upright and seemed to be looking at all that was going on, but stayed motionless. And it seemed to be facing the opposite way of my vantage point, toward the car and truck, although you couldn't see the actual detail of this thing. You could definitely see it had an upright human stance. The car headlights didn't pass all the way through it, but almost bent around it. The light was still passing through it, but not in a straight line. I could see through it like foggy glass or glass with a slight smoke to it. There was no shadow visible on the ground around the figure. After the car and truck sped away, it simply vanished. Now I'm starting to wonder if there might actually be some connection between the state of Kansas and these near-invisible villains. Now, if you're sitting on additional information on this subject, you know what to do. In the meantime, I'll keep my ear to the Wisdom Post. And thanks again for the phone call. As the crisp fall air rolls in and the leaves begin to change, don't rely on pumpkin to spice up your life. Embrace the natural power of hemp this fall season with Faya. Farmed and crafted in the U.S. and trusted by over 500,000 customers, Via's premium federally legal CBD and THC products are amazing for relaxation and rejuvenation. I especially love how they create products with specific effects in mind. They can help you get better sleep, ease anxiety, or simply elevate your mood. Some of my favorites are the Dreams Sleep Gummies. The first time I tried them, I got the best night's sleep I've gotten in a while, and woke up feeling refreshed. The Elevate Gummies are also a new favorite of mine, when I'm just looking to relax and hang out for the evening. They give me a nice, relaxed, elevated feeling. Now, if THC isn't for you, you can still enjoy their CBD line, with products designed for sleep, focus, and energy. Their products also don't stop at gummies. They have topicals, drops, flower, and more. Now, Via's products are affordable and accessible, and Via ships legally to nearly all 50 states in the U.S. in discreet packaging with a worry-free guarantee. If you're 21 or over, check out the link to Via in the show notes and use code MONSTERS to receive 15% off. Now, after you purchase, they ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them Monsters Among Us sent you. Again, check out the link to Via in the show notes and use code MONSTERS to receive 15% off. Don't forget to tell them Monsters Among Us sent you. This fall, enhance your everyday with Via.
I think with Brandon IU, with him missing the majority of...
Now let's stay in the Empire State, because I have a fun little entry from Caleb to brighten your skies.
Hey Derek, my name's Caleb. I'm calling from lower western New York, Jamestown, Falconer area. My story happened at the beginning of November 2023, depending on when you're hearing this. It was about 2 in the morning. I had went to my girlfriend's house after work, and we had fallen asleep, and it was about 2 in the morning, and when we woke up, and I was like, oh man, I gotta get home. So I said goodbye to her and left, and I live out in the country. So as I left town, I was turning to go home, and I get on the road that intersects mine, and it's a clear night, the sky's nice and full of stars, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm driving, and something catches my corner of my eye, and I look, and out of this whole night sky, there's this large amber-colored light to my right, just sitting in the middle of the sky. But it wasn't, like, high enough to be a plane, and it sat there, and if you looked closely at it, it had these 4 little red lights that hung off of it. So I slowed down, and I didn't know what to make of the situation, and I'm trying logically to think of everything I can possibly think of what this could be. Is it a plane, or is it a helicopter? And it seemed like it was moving with me, but at the same time, I couldn't tell. It seemed like it was moving with me, but at the same time, it seemed like it wasn't moving at all. And I'm trying to chalk it down to, like, it's got to be a plane. Well, it could have been, but they don't fly that low, and you would have heard it, because I slowed right down and rolled my window down so I see if I could hear it, and I couldn't hear anything. Not a sound, not like propellers or an engine, nothing. I went through all the logic. I was actually so freaked out that I had called my girlfriend and was talking to her on my way home, trying to figure out what it was, and she had trouble believing me, but I could never make out what it was. It was the strangest thing. I chalked it up to a plane, then it didn't make sense. I chalked it up to a helicopter. That didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. And it couldn't have been like a drone. Who's out flying a drone at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere? And it was hovering over the woods. It was strange. So I'm driving and I'm looking at it, and just as I get to the intersection that's my road, I turn to my right and look as I'm pulling in my driveway, and it's gone. Completely out of the sky. This thing that was high enough for me to see it and had followed me the whole way down the road, and I didn't even see it until we got into the middle of the country. Gone, just like that. And I have no clue. I stood in my driveway for 10 minutes trying to figure out where it went. It was insane, and I don't know if I'll ever see something like that again, but it was one of the strangest things ever. But, let me know what you think, or if you know anything about the area. I love the podcast. I listen to it religiously at work or just doing everyday stuff. Thank you for everything that you guys do, and have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, Caleb. Now, I've actually heard about something like this several times, and 9 times out of 10, it ends with whatever this craft is suddenly appearing overhead, as though it suddenly realized you were looking at it, and it took notice. And oftentimes it seems to be one of these black Delta Triangle craft that show up, a red light on each of the 3 corners, and one bright white or amber light there in the center. And if I'm honest, Caleb's call sounds exactly like a lot of those experiences. Now frankly, I'm jealous, Caleb, because I've been dying to see one of these things myself. I just never seem to be lucky enough. But I am thankful that you took the time to share your experience with us. So thank you, Caleb, for calling in. Now, it's been a while since we shared a good doppelganger story here on the main show. So let's remedy that with Gabrielle's entry out of Pennsylvania.
Hi, Derek. My name is Gabrielle. I'm from Pennsylvania, but the story actually takes place with one of my friends who lives in Argentina. So when we met, it was originally my boyfriend and I meeting our friend who lives in Argentina and another friend who actually lives in the U.S. with me. The 4 of us met through similar interests online and became friends and would hang out and play games together kind of thing. Most people do. A long story short, the friend who lives in the U.S. with me specifically, we got into a bit of an altercation. We ended up breaking the friendship up, all 4 of us, with the one specific person that she just, I don't know what happened specifically. It's just a whole mess. But she, out of the blue, just ghosted all 3 of us, and the 3 of us have just been picking up the pieces since then. But I'm calling about this because the other day, the 3 of us got together and we were about to play one of those ghost hunting games, and my friend from Argentina all of a sudden went, "Hey, I have this story to tell you guys about our former friend, M." And she proceeded to tell us about the fact that she was walking around in I believe it was a mall, and had heard what kind of sounded like a familiar voice and was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And I don't think it was specifically the person, but whatever it did, it caused her to look around, and from the back, she saw this person that looked exactly like our former friend M. So she was just absolutely shocked and confused and did not want anything to do with this, considering how bad it was, this breakup. But the person turned around, and it looked exactly like our former friend M, completely. And she said, "I have no idea how this could have happened." And I was about to make a joke of like, oh, maybe she couldn't leave us alone long enough to do anything. And my friend immediately followed it up with, "No, there's no way, because we know M doesn't even speak Spanish either. Not to mention how expensive plane tickets would be to get the entire way down to Argentina." And so it was a weird story, and I'm pretty sure she left and kind of walked off as fast as she could because she did not want that association of memory. But we just could not believe the idea of a doppelganger of our former friend existing in another country and the circumstances that came to be with that. So that's basically the story. But I love your podcast. You're doing amazing work. Thank you so much for all of this. And I hope you have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Now, it's got to be weird to see someone's doppelganger out and about. But I bet it's another level of strange to see that doppelganger speak a different language. Fluently. Talk about weird. And calls like this remind you that you never know who you might run into. So keep your guard up. And thank you again, Gabrielle, for calling in. Now, don't forget to visit our merchandise shop for all of your holiday shopping needs. monstersamonguspodcast.com, and click that shop tab to pick up any number of amazing items designed by any number of amazing independent paranormal themed artists like Jonathan Dodd, Brent Manning, Caitlin Grabenstein, Kit Fox, Chuddy Winks, Easton Hawk, Adam Parnell Deal, Jordan Hirschberger, Hog Island Press, Maximus Prime Art, Liz Pavlovic, Greg Johnson, Cryptid Zoo, Brian Giordano, and Erie Eric. And we're adding new items designed by new artists each and every year. Now again, that's monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the shop tab. And I highly recommend you check out each of these artists independently. You can find a link to their work in each of their listings over at our shop. Go check them out. Now I think this next story is on the odd side, but I'll let you make that determination. Steve from South Carolina, welcome to the show.
Hello, Derek. This is Steve from Conway, South Carolina. I'm calling in reference to Season 17, Episode 13. I believe the guy's name was Eric in Kansas that was staying with a friend, and he mentioned the black blob that he saw. I had the same experience here in Conway. I was sleeping one night, and I woke up, and I looked towards the corner of the room, and I saw something looking over where I have some fossil shark teeth, literally like observing or whatever it was doing. And as soon as I came to and looked over, it just kind of zipped out the window as fast as you can possibly move. And I have no idea what it was. I've searched black orbs and various things of that nature and haven't been able to come up with an answer, but it was around the same height. I'd say 3 feet tall. You never know. I appreciate you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steve. Now, I didn't realize it until recently, but I've received all sorts of submissions similar to this one. Small, black, blob-like figures that dart around a darkened space. Now, in addition to Steve's sighting here, Delaney managed to find at least a half a dozen other encounters that seem to describe something similar, and I've linked to all of those in tonight's show notes. But even on Monsters Among Us Junior, we've been talking about these black blobs. In fact, I shared a story on this week's episode that is quite similar to Steve's, and it has some added details that really make it a fun entry. So I figured, why not share it here tonight? So from episode 9 of our spin-off series, Monsters Among Us Junior, please welcome Gavin from the Mitten State.
Hey, it's Gavin from Michigan again, and I have another weird experience that actually happened to me when I was 9. I thought you might want to hear about it. So at the time, I was going through some family trouble, but I'm kind of convinced that something that my mother might have possibly conjured, because she believed she was a witch and many things like that, might have attached itself to me. Because one day when I was at my dad's house, I was going to bed, and it was about maybe 4 in the morning, something like that, pitch black, total darkness in my room. But there's just enough light filtering in from the windows that I could see like this black shelf on my wall. It's about 4 feet long and about 2 inches thick. And it has all these little knickknacks on it. And then out of the corner of my eye, and I follow this thing with my head, there's this, I don't know how to describe it. It was almost like a Play-Doh starfish, if you will, but just made this inky black nastiness. And I just got this weird feeling about it. And I had this feeling it was watching me. And it started by by the left end of the shelf, and it slowly walked across the shelf. And when it got to the end of the shelf, it knocked something over. And that thing just shattered into a million pieces. Then I look at this thing, and the thing looks back at me. And it's really weird, because this thing is like maybe 4 or 5 inches tall at the most. So it's about the same size as knickknacks. And it's really creeping me out. And it starts walking back, and then it falls off the edge of this shelf. And I hear it go plop on the ground, almost like a wet sucker sound. And then my parents must have heard the thing crash on the floor, because they go to open my door, and I look back where it was. It's gone. I have never seen it since. And I guess this is also the right time to mention this too. This could also be a solution to it. At the time, I had just gotten back from Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, and I brought back with me an actual bullet that was fired. So I'm not sure if that could have been it, if it could have been a soldier's soul that was attached to that. I don't really know what it was. And I know it wasn't the light from outside. I have these blackout curtains that shut out almost all the light in my room. I just can't really explain it, and I thought you might want to know, Derek. And well, it was nice talking to you, and if I hear anything weird again, hope to call you soon about it. Thank you, and bye.
Yep, that's a black blob, all right. Now, if this story interests you, be sure to head on over to tonight's show notes and check out those additional reports. Now, it's kind of crazy to think that something like this might exist out there. But it might even be crazier to think that all of these people are lying, and that all of these reports are simply conjured up. There's something weird going on. That's for sure. Oh, and if you liked Gavin's story, why don't you head on over and check out our latest episode of Monsters Among Us Jr. Now, we release the episode every Wednesday. It can be found wherever you find your podcast. Thanks again, Steve and Gavin, for both of those entries.
C5 been a cultural figure for years.
Well, he came from a small school just like I did.
Issues, and yet, if you saw a lot...
Now, this next one is another black blob story, but this one seems to fall more into the shadow entity realm, rather than a short, cartoonish, anthropomorphic ink blot entity. That's a mouthful. Let's get Johanna in here to explain what I'm talking about.
Hey, Derek. I'm Johanna, and I'm calling from the state of Missouri, and I would like to tell you a story that actually takes place back in, it must have been 2004 or maybe 2005. I was 14 or 15 years old, and it actually takes place in San Bernardino, California. I grew up in Southern California, so this takes place at my ex-stepdad's house. He had just moved to this house, and the room that I was staying in, didn't have a whole lot of furniture in it. It had, a dresser and a mattress on the floor because we're still waiting for my bed frame. So the point is that I was going to go do homework in my room, and I was doing homework on my mattress, and I must have fallen asleep doing my homework because I just remember waking up, sitting up, looking down and seeing my homework kind of spread, across the mattress on the floor. And then I turned to look at the doorway, and the way my room was positioned, so if you were to look out my doorway, you would see straight down the hallway. It was a one-floor house, straight down the hallway into the kitchen and living room area. And then right to the left is my stepdad's room, and to the right is my little brother's room. And I'm sitting up and I look towards the doorway, and I kid you not, as tall as the doorway, gives me chills thinking about it, as tall as the doorway was this black figure that was cloaked, and you couldn't tell what the heck it was. I was struck in fear, and I'm just looking at this thing. It was fully cloaked. You couldn't see any hands or feet or anything like that. It just looked black, and it wasn't moving, but the cloakness of it almost looked like it was in water in a way, and it was just there, and it was just looking at me. It didn't come in the room. My door was open, and it was just in the doorway, and I was so scared. And then I remember saying to myself, wake up, wake up, wake up, you're dreaming, you must be dreaming. Wake up, wake up. And then all of a sudden I woke up, and I sat up, and everything looked exactly the same. Exactly the same as it did with my eyes closed. And I realized, okay, you must have been dreaming. So I realized that everyone else in the house, my stepdad and my little brother, they were asleep too. So they must have just went to bed.
I must have like knocked out. I didn't even hear anybody go to bed or anything because they were awake when I went to bed. And this was like, before iPads and smartphones and stuff. And I didn't really feel like, I was just trying to convince myself pretty much to go back to sleep because I didn't really feel like I had any other choice. So I calm down. I tell myself it's just a nightmare. I say a little prayer and I go back to sleep. But the moment that I enter that dream state, I sit up and I see that thing again in the doorway. And I tell myself again, wake up, wake up, wake up. You must be dreaming. Wake up, wake up. And so I wake up. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I do not want to fall back asleep because if I'm going to keep seeing this thing, and I was also really, really scared and I didn't know what to do. But my little brother in his room, he had a bunk bed set up and it had like a full bed on the bottom and then like a twin on top. So I eventually built up the nerve to run as fast as I could through the hallway into my little brother's room. And I just like fell asleep on the bottom bunk because he was sleeping on the top. And I was praying until I fell asleep pretty much because it just made me feel better. And so the next day when I woke up, I had never ever had an experience like that before and I didn't know who to talk to. So I actually called my mom because my mom is pretty sensitive to this kind of stuff. I called her and I explained everything that I saw. And all she said was, I saw the same thing when I went to his house the last time I was there, only I was awake. And I got like full on chills and was happy that she understood me. And you know what? Since I've heard and listened to your podcast, and I heard other people say that they've seen like the mentor looking beings. So yeah, it kind of looked like a Dementor, I guess. Like I didn't grow up watching Harry Potter. My mom was very strict when it came to anything dealing with witchcraft or wizards and witches. And as I got older, I realized it's just because she actually really believes in the power of it all and didn't want to expose me to that when I was young. Honestly, as I've gotten older and even around that time, I've started like branching off. I love horror. I love anything paranormal. I just have a huge interest in it. And I think it's because I have had so many experiences, but I really have never had anyone to share them with because people just think you're lying or they just don't want to talk about it. If they've had experiences of their own and they just, they don't find it interesting, they just want to forget about it. So I really appreciate this podcast for that reason, as a platform to share and talk with other people and hear other people's stories. So thank you for that. But going back to it being a Dementor, I mean, I know it wasn't because it's like a Harry Potter character, but it did kind of look like that, except it was all black. And again, like I saw no hands or feet. And I think I was most likely lucid dreaming. I didn't know what that term meant at that time, but the reason why I think that is because I was able to recognize that I was in a different state of mind and tell myself to wake up. And also because everything looked exactly the same. Like I closed my eyes, it looked exactly the same as if it were when I opened. Like everything looked the same. Like nothing was out of place. Everything was as dim lit in the dream state as it was in my waking state. So when I was older and I learned about lucid dreaming, I'm 32 now, I thought back to that time. It was the only time in my life where I could even relate to lucid dreaming, and I didn't like try to do it. It just happened, and it was very terrifying. The very first terrifying paranormal experience I've had, but I've always kind of had paranormal experiences happen to me. But again, this hasn't happened since then, and I don't ever want to see that thing again. Back then I thought I saw a demon or something, but now I'm not really sure what it was. Anyways, I hope you can use this story, and I hope other people can relate to it. Again, thanks again for the opportunity to talk about it. But anyways, thanks again. And also, Mom, if you're listening, please call in and tell them about all of the stories from your experiences in Mount St. Helens. She's got crazy stories, and she won't talk to them with anybody. But I really, really, really hope she calls them in. All right, take care, everybody.
Yeah, Mom, you should call in. 888-608-NIGHT. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you, Johanna, for calling in. Now, San Bernardino is right down the road from us. I think 8 or 9 miles as the crow flies. Now, the place is a bit strange to me, because I haven't heard of too many publicly known haunted locations in or around San Bernardino. But what I have heard is a number of stories about haunted private homes in that area. Now, that could just be a coincidence, but it's worth mentioning. And one aspect of Johanna's story that's worth mentioning was that the figure looked like it was submerged in water. That's a detail that I don't remember hearing before. Now, I'll wrap this segment up by saying that I initially thought these were just sleep paralysis episodes that Johanna endured. But if the mom saw the same entity while she was awake, that sort of throws that theory out the window. So regardless of what it was, we thank you, Johanna, for sharing it here with us tonight. And folks, that takes us to tonight's final entry. A very unsettling entry that takes us to the state of Arizona. Jim, the mic is yours.
Hello, Derek. My name's Jim. Live in Phoenix, Arizona. And this incident happened in 2020. It was in July, and as everybody knows, it's very hot in Phoenix in July. I've lived in the same neighborhood for 59 years now, and I'm hoping that you or your listeners, once they hear this story, maybe have an answer for me or have had similar experiences. It's been on my mind for this time, and it's weighed on me. So in July, I went to lunch like I normally do. My place of employment is only a few miles from a strip mall where there's several restaurants. I have been employed at the same job for 41 years, and just like we always do at around 11 o'clock, we all go to lunch. This particular day, I went by myself to get a sandwich. I backed my company truck up in the parking lot, and this is up in North Phoenix, very busy street, and backed into a parking spot, and I proceeded to walk across the parking lot and go into the sandwich shop. Just before I got into the sandwich shop, I was reaching for the door. I noticed a gentleman, about 5'5", heavy set. He was wearing a dark blue suit with a white shirt, and I thought it was very odd because in July it's very hot in Phoenix, and he was just out of dress for the time. And he said to me, before I started to go into the restaurant, I was sent here to tell you what your purpose in life is and your destiny. And I turned to him further, and this was on my right side, and I said, "Excuse me?" And this person never blinked, showed no emotion on his face, and he said it again. "I was sent here to get you, to show you what your purpose in life is and your destiny." At that moment, it seemed like time was frozen, because just behind him were two girls, and they were engaged in a conversation, but when I was looking at them, they were stopped. Their mouths were partially open like they were talking, but they were not moving. And then I turned to my left because I saw this couple going into the restaurant, but they stopped as well, reaching for the door. And bear in mind, I was on a busy area of Phoenix at a strip mall. I heard no noise of traffic, no people walking, no people talking, just this gentleman. It was like I describe it as if you were in Jell-O and trying to walk or talk. Everything was just like stopped or in slow motion. I turned back to the gentleman and I said, "Excuse me?" And he said it one more time. "I was sent here to get you, to show you your purpose in life and your destiny." At that moment, I paused for a second, and I kind of was trying to understand what was going on, and everything went back to normal. The gentleman was gone. I turned to the two girls that were behind him, and I said to them, quote, "Did you see the man I was talking to?" And they both said, "No, we did not," period. I looked down the little breezeway where you could walk. He was not there. I looked to the left, to the right. That couple that was going in the store just entered the store. It was like time stood still. It bothers me to this day to wonder who this person was and what happened for about 5 minutes of my life. Derek, I appreciate you taking my call. And if anybody has ever had any experiences like this or can maybe explain maybe what I went through, I would appreciate it. This is a true story. I served in the military for 8 years. I've been employed at the same employer for now 40 years. And I just want everyone to know that this is a true story, period. I want also people to realize that in July in Phoenix, it was a very hot day. That day it was around 11:15, 11:20, and this man was in a dark blue suit. He was about 5'5", and like I said, a little bit heavy set. He showed no emotion on his face. He never blinked when I was talking to him, and he just stared at me and said, "I was sent here to get you so I can show you your purpose in life and your destiny, period." Thank you again, Derek. Thank you again for having a great show, and I look forward to hearing from you or any of your fellow listeners if they can explain exactly what happened to me. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Well, Jim, I don't have any answers for you, but I do have all sorts of questions. Like, who was this man? Was he even a man at all? How did this quote-unquote man seemingly stop time? And why did no one else see him? And most importantly, if he came there to show Jim his purpose in life and his destiny, why didn't he show it? Why was no other information conveyed? He did the equivalent of showing up and saying, "I have important information about your future," and simply disappeared without saying another word. Super weird. Well, like I said, Jim, I have no answers, but I do have the ability to ask all these listeners from around the world. So if you're listening and you've experienced anything like this, or you think you've even heard something like this, be sure to call in and I'll update Jim and the rest of the audience. In the meantime, thank you, Jim, for sharing this puzzling experience. I sure hope there's not some dude off somewhere telling his friends about the time he walked up to a stranger and told him he had information about their purpose in life and their destiny, then just walked away. That's one way to mess with someone's mind. No, I don't think that's the case here, though. Partly because most people don't stop time for a simple prank. But we do thank you, Jim, for thinking of us and taking the time to call in. And that's going to do it, folks. That'll wrap it up for this part of the show. Now meet me after this final ad break for one more story. A creepy one about ghost children you don't want to miss. But first, Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Delaney Bowers. Copyright Red Crow Media. All media used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook if you're into the whole social media thing. While you're at it, jump on over to YouTube. Give us a like and subscribe and maybe push play on a video or two. We sure could use the love there. And finally, tonight's score was provided by Iron Cthulhu Apocalypse, Co.ag Music, and Carl Casey. and White Bat Audio. Alright, monsters and ghouls, don't forget to stick around until after the last ad for that haunting tale that I promised you. And be sure to check out our film, Shadows in the Desert, High Strangeness in the Borrego Triangle. Just visit borregotriangle.com to learn more. And don't forget to catch Monsters Among Us Jr. every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcast. And of course, don't forget about the Tuesday episode. Things get a bit hairy on next week's show, as you won't want to miss that. Until then, thanks again, everyone. Keep it spooky, and have a good night.
So they had to...
This is another great example of that.
And I'm out.
All right.
Now for that unsettling story that I promised you. As if the previous 9 weren't unsettling themselves. But this one is creepy as all get out. Picture yourself slowly driving down your long, narrow, rural driveway, late at night, and you see lights ahead in the fog. Now as you slowly approach, you think, crashed car, signal lights, a UFO even. Nah, what Michael in New York found was much more disturbing.
Hello, Derek. Michael here from Central New York. First-time caller and big fan of the podcast. It's my favorite, and I listen to it weekly while I'm at work. So I'd like to submit my own, what I believe to be a paranormal experience, in which I was reminded of after listening to The Bloody Stranger of Season 17, Episode 4. I was roughly 11 years old when this took place. I'm 34 now, so this happened quite some time ago. My parents were heavy chain smokers, so they would drag me and my sister along to a reservation in Pembroke, New York for cartons of cigarettes. And we lived in New Haven, New York at the time, so it was quite a hike there and back. We would get back to our house really late at night, from anywhere 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. at night, and the dirt road in which our house was located on also led to our dirt driveway, which, mind you, was 1.5 miles long and had absolutely no lights at all, no street lamps, and was a heavily wooded area. And the night in which this event took place was a nice clear night, but was still incredibly dark because of the trees, and the road was only illuminated by my dad's Chevy Blazer's headlights. So as we turned onto the driveway, about 1/4 mile in, all we see is a set of lanterns ahead. And as we approached the lights, there were 3 kids dressed in very odd clothing to me at the time. Later on, I learned that there was quite a bit of Amish folk that lived in the area, and I made the connection of the style of clothes they were wearing. One thing I noticed with the kids is that they were extremely pale. We're talking like livor mortis type pale. My father rolled down the window as we pulled up to them and asked what they were doing in our driveway so late at night, and neither kid answered. They simply stared at my father and continued walking by the vehicle. My father was incredibly confused and concerned, but pulled away heading towards our house. Now, as we pulled away, my father looked in the rearview mirror, and myself, my sister, and my mother all looked back in the back window, and to our surprise, the kids disappeared. It was wild. My dad put the car in reverse to make sure the kids didn't venture off into the woods, because there were no trails or anything like that, and sure enough, the kids were nowhere in sight. There was no sounds, nothing. And they literally walked by our car seconds ago. I texted my sister a few days ago to see if she remembered, since she was really young at the time, and she replied back, "Sure do remember it. It was super late at night, and they had their lamps." To this day, I cannot explain what that experience was all about. I can confidently say that they were not black-eyed children, because they didn't have that characteristic. Anyways, Thank you for the work that you do, and the merch is incredible. I just ordered the Campfire Bigfoot t-shirt and the Ghost Beanie, and super stoked for their arrival. Thanks for airing my story on the show, and take care.
Thank you, Michael. Well, folks, what do you think? Lost Amish children? The ghost of kids from the 19th century? Or some sort of elaborate prank? I know I would love to know. But like with most of these stories, we may never know the truth. But thank you, Michael, for calling in and leaving this little mystery, and for picking up some gear from our merch shop. I sure do hope you enjoy your goodies. If you'd like to join them, go to monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the shop tab. And go to patreon.com and search for Monsters Among Us Podcast to get bonus material. Or go to the MAU show page on Apple Podcasts, and you can now join the Beyond subscription right from there. Now, it's in the Beyond that we share entries like Garrett's, out of the state of Georgia.
Hey, Derek. This is Garrett from Atlanta, Georgia. Like a lot of your listeners, I've had a few experiences in my life, but I wanted to call and tell you about one that has a lot of researchable material in it, I guess. So this happened back in about 2002, 2003. I was in a band at the time called The Letters Organized, and we used to tour around the country and the world and stuff all the time in a band, playing shows and like upping the punks, you know. So anyway, this one particular night we were in Tupelo, Mississippi, and the show had wrapped up. It's getting kind of late, and we needed to go to Baton Rouge the next day. So at the time period, this was back way before there were smartphones or just anything that would navigate you other than using MapQuest. So we had a map book in the van, and we would look and see what we needed to do when we had these kind of moments. And we found that the best path to go from Tupelo